Hello everyone, and welcome to College House, home of the Study Society. We are very honoured tonight to have Anne Baring with us, Jungian analyst, author, fashion designer and mystic. Anne, a heartfelt welcome from us all. I want to give first of all everyone a short history of your life. This is a very extraordinary one and a very unusual one. You were educated at Oxford, where you studied medieval history. In your 20s, you travelled throughout Asia, working in India, Cambodia, Thailand, Taiwan, Indonesia, and Japan, collecting photographs of the greatest works of art from museums in these countries. You say these journeys changed the course of your life because they put you in touch with the sacred literature and art of ancient and extraordinary cultures. You then returned to London when you were 26 and published your first book in 1961, the one work, A Journey Towards the Self, which looked at the teachings of Hinduism and Buddhism and explored their similarity to the essential teaching of Christ. You then entered Jungian analysis, and it was during this time you also started work as a fashion designer, running a successful shop on Beauchamp Place in London. You say this outlet for your creativity helped you overcome serious depression. You then trained as a Jungian analyst with Dr. Hella Adler and practiced as an analyst in London. Since 1992, you have co-authored 7 books, including The Myth of the Goddess with your friend Jules Cashford, The Mystic Vision and the Divine Feminine with Andrew Harvey, and Soul Power, An Agenda for a Conscious Humanity with Dr. Sheila Elworthy. In 2004, you published a book for children called The Birds Who Flew Beyond Time, based on the Sufi text, The Conference of the Birds. Your most recent book, The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul, updated and reprinted in 2020, was given the Book of the Year prize by the Scientific and Medical Network in 2013. It's very difficult for me to find ways to truly convey the wonderful insights which this book contains. Its mystic vision, its huge scholarship, breadth and scope, and its lyrical style, which makes it such a delight to read. Thank you for being with us, Anne, and I'll pass everything over to you. Thank you.
There we are.
There we go.
So I shall begin now. Alchemy flows beneath the surface of Western civilization like a river of gold, preserving its images and its insights for us so that we could one day understand our presence on the planet better than we do. Alchemy builds a rainbow bridge between the human and the divine, the seen and unseen dimensions of reality, between matter and spirit. The cosmos calls to us to become aware that we participate in its life, that everything is sacred and connected, one life, one spirit. Alchemy responds to that call. It asks us to develop cosmic consciousness, to awaken the divine spark in our soul and reunite it with the invisible soul of the cosmos. It changes our perception of reality and answers the questions, who are we and why are we here? It refines and transmutes the base metal of our understanding so that we evolved from the very substance of the stars can know that we participate in the mysterious ground of spirit while living in this material dimension of reality. This is a time of revelation and a crucial time of choice. The revelation of what the grievous harm we have inflicted on the life of the planet, and the choice we need to make to transform our relationship with it from one of dominance and exploitation to one of service and love. We live in a world that has been governed by the masculine archetype for some 4,000 years, with no feminine archetype to balance it, no sacred marriage between them. As a result, world culture and the human psyche have become dangerously out of alignment with the earth and the cosmos. All our relationships need healing, but above all, our relationship with nature and the earth, because that is the primary one that has been out of balance for millennia and is in desperate need of healing. Collectively, we are going through a profound alchemical process of transformation as we live through this pandemic. This is an unprecedented trauma affecting the whole of humanity. On top of this, we are confronted by the fact of intensifying global warming and the question of whether we are approaching the end of our time on this planet. Our children and grandchildren are deeply distressed and anxious about their future. These events constitute a spiritual emergency, shaking us to our core. But the very peril we are in may be our salvation if we can grasp the message of what is happening, that this is a rite of passage we are going through, a shamanic rite of profound awakening and healing, an experience powerful enough to stop us in our tracks and help us to understand what has to change. This is surely the message of the pandemic and of climate change, where the COP26 conference has been addressing the immense problem of how to reduce our fossil fuel and methane emissions. This conference is the first major sign that humanity may at last be awakening to the danger it is in. We may take comfort from the fact that the science of alchemy reminds us that in all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order. At the present time, the neglect of our inner life and our deepest instinctual needs has led to the situation where, as in the Grail legend, the territory of the soul is in a wasteland, in the grip of a terrible drought. Few people understand anymore what the landscape and the language of the soul are like. Few can read the images that are like hieroglyphs whose key has been lost. An understanding of the basic concepts of alchemy can help us to reconnect with the soul and with the hidden ground of life. The alchemical images yield their secret to those who contemplate them. But before I come to alchemy, I have to go back far into the past to explain certain events that traumatized the soul and gradually severed our relationship with the cosmos and the earth. Our relationship with nature and the earth was gradually weakened as the image of deity moved from Great Mother to Great Father over the last 4,000 years. The loss of the Great Mother and the goddess came in stages, but there was one particular event that accelerated her demise. To understand this, we need to go back to the first temple in Jerusalem that was built by Solomon around 1000 BC. The Old Testament scholar, Dr. Margaret Barker, has revealed the enormous change in Hebrew cosmology that took place in 621 BCE, when monotheism was established in Judaism. The Jewish people once worshipped both a goddess and a god, a king and queen of heaven, who together created the world. This magnificent temple had an ancient shamanic visionary tradition, where in the great tower in the furthest courtyard of the temple, the Holy of Holies, the high priest communed with the Queen of Heaven. She was worshipped as the Holy Spirit and divine wisdom, whose teaching was compared to the light of the dawn. She was also worshipped as the tree of life, a cosmic tree that connected the invisible and visible worlds, and whose fruit was the gift of immortality. In 621 BCE, under a king called Josiah, a powerful group of priests called Deuteronomists took control of the temple. In an act that has affected both Jews and Christians to this day, they banished the ancient shamanic rituals of the high priest and instituted their own rule. They destroyed every trace of the goddess Asherah, the queen of heaven. The statue of the goddess and the great bronze serpent representing her power to regenerate life were removed from the temple. Her sacred groves were cut down. All images of her were smashed to pieces. The ancient shamanic rituals of the high priest, which had honored and communed with the Queen of Heaven as divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, were replaced by new rituals based on strict obedience to Yahweh's law, which forbade the making of images. Dr. Margaret Barker writes that it is essential to keep in mind the massive destruction and cultural revolution at the end of the 7th century BCE, and to recognize that no complete reconstruction is possible. The result was that Yahweh was left as the sole creator God. The divine feminine aspect of the Godhead was excised from Judaism, but also from Christianity, which took its image of God from the Old Testament. In 325 CE, at the Council of Nicaea, the Holy Spirit, previously feminine in the Old Testament, was named the third aspect of the male Trinity, and all connection with the divine feminine was therefore permanently lost. The loss of the goddess was the primary reason that we lost our relationship with nature, because the goddess had personified nature for thousands of years. The Deuteronomists also demoted the goddess Asherah, whose title was Mother of All Living, into the human figure of Eve, and created the myth of the fall in Genesis 2 and 3, with its message of sin, guilt, punishment, and the banishment of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden to a life of hardship and suffering on earth. We are still traumatized by the effects of this myth, which became the foundation of the Christian myth and the reason given for our need for a Redeemer. It imprinted on us a totally false image of our presence on this planet and placed a heavy burden of guilt and shame on our shoulders, all created by a group of very powerful priests whose myth was presented as divine revelation and was accepted as divine revelation by Christianity. The myth was also the primary reason for the vicious and unrelenting persecution of generations of women who had the heavy burden of the sin of Eve placed on them by the Christian fathers and the endless sermons of Christian priests, as well as their persecution and murder as witches by the Inquisition over some 5 centuries. The second nail in the coffin of the feminine was the creation, under the influence of St. Paul, of the immensely powerful myth that Jesus was the celibate only Son of God, whose sacrificial death on the cross has redeemed us. This myth was formulated at the same Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, when Jesus was declared to be of the same substance as God and the Son of God. To hold this title, Jesus had to be immaculately conceived and also celibate in order to avoid being tainted by original sin. The church went to enormous lengths to conceal the fact of his marriage to Mary Magdalene, but the truth about their marriage survived, as depicted here in this unique sculpture on an altar in a church in the town of Foix, near the Pyrenees in France. And also in this painting of the Last Supper by Leonardo, the figure in pink is Mary Magdalene. Think what it would have meant for the development of Western civilization if the union of Jesus and Mary Magdalene had been celebrated by the church founded in his name. Had their union been recognized at the inception of Christianity, the emphasis on celibacy as the path to spirituality might never have existed. we might have been spared the disastrous association of sin with sexuality and the misogyny, mistrust of, and contempt for women that pollutes our culture to this day. We would have had a living image of a sacred marriage right at the heart of Christianity. Deep within the unconscious is the idea that because the earth was a place of exile, sin, and suffering for Adam and Eve, it was no longer sacred. Man was given dominion over it and over the animals, birds, fish, and reptiles. This, I think, has led ultimately to the secular myth of scientific materialism, which has dispensed with God and the soul and sees man as the master of all he surveys, with limitless power over nature and matter, both of which are believed to be without consciousness. For over 2 centuries, we have been told by science that we are alone in a vast, uncaring universe that is without life, intelligence, consciousness, meaning, or purpose. The basic tenets of scientific materialism, or reductionism, or scientism as it's called, are that the physical material universe is the only one that exists. The whole universe is basically a mechanism. It has no conscious beings in it apart from ourselves. There is no scientific evidence for the existence of God and the soul. We, as conscious humans, are separate from the life around us, the life of nature and the life of the universe, both of which are without consciousness. Our consciousness begins and ends with the neurons of our physical brain. When the brain dies, consciousness ceases to exist. Therefore, there can be no survival of the soul. These beliefs have inflicted another trauma. Scientific materialism, or physicalism as it's sometimes called, is only a theory or a hypothesis, but it is presented as irrefutable fact and taught as such. These beliefs, whether derived from the myth of the fall or from scientific materialism, have led directly, in my view, to the exploitation and devastation of the planet. If matter is insentient, it doesn't matter what we do to it. It doesn't matter what we do to it. I think you can see what a huge work of healing is needed now to free us from the legacy of these past beliefs that linger in the unconscious. Millennia ago, spirit was not outside or beyond us. We were within spirit. Spirit was the air we breathed, present within every aspect of the life around us. It is this utterly different shamanic experience of life that we have lost, yet it still lives deep within our soul memory. Alchemy, descending from what was taught in certain temples in Egypt 5,000 years ago, and known as the Hermetic science, kept this ancient awareness alive for us, and we are beginning to recover it now. Now, above the central door of the western facade of Chartres Cathedral, we see the figure of Christ contained within the mandorla or vesica piscis. As a cosmic being, he incarnated on this planet to offer humanity a path of healing through reconnection with the divine ground. But he also spoke about the unrecognized divinity within each one of us. The fully awakened and enlightened man and woman we have the power to become, recovering our true identity as cosmic and galactic beings, incarnated on this planet for an evolutionary purpose. He also said that the kingdom of heaven was spread out upon the earth, but men did not see it. He did not ask for our belief, but for the transformation of our understanding of life and our own nature. These images of 2 of the greatest teachers of humanity, true sons of God, represent the awakened state of cosmic consciousness that is a potential within all of us. This marvelous Buddhist sculpture carries forward the ancient Vedic and Upanishadic tradition of raising the immense creative power of instinct from a state of unconsciousness to a state of fully awakened consciousness, symbolized by the 7 protective hoods of the cobra goddess, who represents the wisdom of the earth spread out protectively behind the Buddha's head. The teaching of Christ aimed to show the shamanic path to awakening that he himself embodied, as he is shown in this painting by Piero della Francesca, rising out of the tomb with the sleeping soldiers at his feet, unaware of what is happening above their heads. The insight beginning to emerge now is that we participate in a cosmic consciousness or intelligence which is co-inherent with every particle of our being and every particle of matter. As I said in the Dream of the Cosmos, we live within a sacred cosmic order. The cosmos does not consist of inanimate matter, but is intelligent, conscious, connected, and alive. God or spirit or divine mind is not something transcendent to us. We are co-inherent with it, part of its being, held in its embrace. Spirit, so long projected onto a transcendent creator remote from our world, is the quintessential consciousness which is awaiting discovery, both in nature and in our nature. This eliminates duality and is one of the great revelations of our time, if only we can see it. Although the gradient for the transformation of consciousness in humanity is so slow and arduous, we are all participating in a stupendous alchemical great work, the evolution of human consciousness. This is something the alchemists understood and was the foundation of all their work. Whereas Christianity taught that the Redeemer is outside us and that our ultimate redemption as Christians has been assured by Christ's sacrificial death, alchemy taught that the alchemist can become the redeemer or rescuer of the lost aspect of spirit hidden within himself and all nature, working with spirit to accomplish its awakening within him. This gives great significance to the individual, since the divine drama of redemption is consummated in and through us. It is an awesome and heroic task. Each one of us carries the mystery of the incarnation of spirit in this dimension, and alchemy is a sacred rite of unification, an opus divinum, as they call it. Long ago, in the 3rd century CE, there was an Egyptian alchemist called Zosimus of Panopolis, who wrote these words: "Hidden within man, there exists a heavenly and divine light, which cannot be placed in man from without, but must emerge from within." Alchemy is a sacred rite of unification, an opus divinum, as I said, because its aim is to reveal our innate divinity, our divine creativity that is part of the creativity of the cosmos, something that was known millennia ago in the temples of Egypt. This invisible yet immanent Holy Spirit is the flow of life in our veins, the flux and flow of our thoughts, the power of our instincts, the miracle of our physical organism, the creative genius of our imagination. Think what it would mean for the transformation of all our relationships if the fact of our innate divinity were known and accepted by all the people on this planet, regardless of race, religion, caste, class, or gender. We are all sons and daughters of God. Alchemy is called the royal art. Each one of us carries within his or her being the potential of the royal value or fully awakened consciousness, symbolized by the mysterious stone or gold of the alchemists. Alchemy is a process of revelation, illumination, and transfiguration. The chrysalis can become a butterfly. Our gold is not the common gold, the alchemist said. There are two categories in this art, namely, seeing with the eye and understanding with the heart. And this is the hidden stone, which is fitly called a gift of God. And this divine stone is the heart and tincture of gold, which the philosophers seek. Alchemy is the hermetic science of transmuting the base metal of the pre-conscious soul, or the unconscious soul, into the gold of the awakened soul that is consciously united with or in touch with the divine ground. The great work of alchemy tells us that we have our origin in the starry ground of the cosmos, that we are literally star life in every cell of our being. The whole of cosmic and planetary evolution is an alchemical process, a continuous process of creation and transformation, of dissolution and regeneration. Everything is in a constant state of flux and becoming. The great work of alchemy refines the base metal of our understanding so that we, evolved from the fiery substance of the stars, can know ourselves as spirit. It heals the deep wound in the human soul that has come into being because of a sense of alienation, fear, loneliness, and separation from the divine. It tells us who we are and why we are here. The experience of reconnection with the light and love of the divine ground is the gold that is not the common gold. So the alchemist said that within manifest life is a hidden reality of the highest order. The cosmos calls to us to be aware that we participate in its life, that everything is sacred and connected. One life, one source, one spirit. The cosmos has a soul, and we can learn how to communicate with that soul. There has always been a chain of teachers, known as the Golden Chain or Catena Aurea, who have transmitted their knowledge and insight from generation to generation over thousands of years. Two great streams of alchemical knowledge, one flowing from Egypt and the other from Persia, Syria, and Islamic Spain, came together in Europe in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. There were some 4,000 alchemists working in Europe between 1200 and 1650, and they created thousands of alchemical texts and images, some of which were called, as in the Sufi tradition, rosaria, or rose gardens. In the Christian West alone, these texts ran to between 20 and 30,000 titles, many of them now safely housed in the Embassy of the Free Mind in Amsterdam, collected there over his lifetime by a remarkable man called Just Ritman. Alchemy and Kabbalah kept alive the shamanic idea that spirit is present in nature. Many Kabbalists were alchemists and vice versa. This image is a Kabbalistic one, where two men are sharing a vision of the higher worlds. In the 17th century, this great science of alchemy could have become the foundation of Western science. However, tragically for all of us and for planetary life, science took the different path of the conquest and control of nature, rather than relationship with her. Our culture is now enthralled to the pervasive and limiting beliefs of scientific materialism, which has prevailed over the last 300 years. Here is an image of the alchemist following in the footsteps of nature, holding in his hand a lantern, which signifies the light of insight, and special glasses so that he can see in the dark. The great work of alchemy is about healing the deep wound in the human soul, inflicted by the dualism of the patriarchal religions that separated nature from spirit, and led ultimately to the desacralization of the created world. It is about recovering the lost lunar shamanic sense of participatory awareness, the lost sense of kinship with all creation. It is about recovering what Einstein called a sacred gift, the poetic vision, the imaginative sensibility that once connected us to nature and the cosmos. At the same time, it is about growing into our unique individuality, differentiating ourselves from the deficient values that presently control the political, and religious life of humanity and the media, living from a totally different perspective on life, in the world, but not identified with the values of the world. This is a very important distinction, which I'm sure you are aware of. Alchemy through a rainbow bridge between spirit and matter, holding the relationship between the above and below, the unmanifest and the manifest, thereby eliminating the dualism that separated nature from spirit. The alchemist said, "Whoever shall make the hidden manifest knoweth the whole work." Much of what they discovered is coming into consciousness now, at this time of humanity's awakening. Alchemy is not merely an art or science to teach metallic transmutation, so much as a true and solid science that teaches how to know the center of all things, which in the divine language is called the spirit of life. Alchemy is the Western tradition of inner psychic transformation. It is a feminine mystery, a mystery of the soul. The symbols yield their secret to those who contemplate them. The process of transformation is unique for each one of us, and yet intrinsically the same for all. The great work of alchemy is about the relationship between man and the cosmos. It's about the creation of an immortal body of light, the integration of body, soul, and spirit, and the conscious reunion with what an alchemist called Gerhard Dorn called the unus mundus, or divine ground. This means we die a conscious death without fear of extinction. The alchemists knew that there is no death for the soul, that consciousness survives the death of the body. An alchemist called Ruland the lexicographer said, "Imagination is the star in man, the celestial and super-celestial body." The great alchemist physician Paracelsus called it imaginatio vera, true imagination. For the alchemists, the imagination is a subtle body, dimension, or field that we tune into when we connect with the deepest level. We communicate with the soul of nature as something sacred, intelligent, alive, and sentient. Jung called the voice of this dimension, which is beyond our time and space, the spirit of the depths. The spirit of the depths is calling out to each one of us now to heal our personal relationships, to cease our territorial rivalry, and threatening the annihilation of millions with our demonic weapons. In many texts, alchemy gives us the image of a king who has to die in order that his son may rule in his stead. So in this rather graphic image, the king is about to be put to death. We can identify the old king with the deficient political and social values and belief systems that currently rule the world, that have ruled it for millennia. In relation to the individual, the old king personifies a consciousness that knows nothing of its deeper ground and is controlled by the power drive of a collective shadow. We can also identify the old king with an outworn image of spirit, split off from nature, that needs to be relinquished in order for a new image to emerge from the depths of the soul. There is a beautiful text that accompanies this image from a marvelous 16th century manuscript called Splendor Solis in the British Museum, thought to have been made by a man called Solomon Trismosin. And this text says, "The king's son lies in the depths of the sea as though dead, but he lives and calls from the deep. Whosoever will free me from the waters and lead me to dry land, him will I prosper with everlasting riches." So here the spirit is calling out for help, and the king's son in the text and in this picture personifies the different consciousness and values generated by a deeper communion with spirit, and also with nature, as you can see by the beautiful border around this picture. 2,000 years ago, Jesus was the young king who brought potential renewal to his culture and the possibility of a radical transformation of human values and relationships, reflected in the sublime words of the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 12 of the Gospel of Matthew. 500 years before him, the Buddha did the same for his culture in India, offering the path of enlightenment to all, regardless of their caste or gender. Alchemy sets its supreme quest in the context of a marriage between the solar and lunar aspects of the soul, a union between our head and our heart, between our rational consciousness focused through thinking and another kind of consciousness focused through the heart, through intuition, feeling, and the creative imagination. This marriage reunites the invisible dimension of the subtle world with the visible material dimension of our experience, so they are no longer seen as separate, but united in a sacred marriage. What this marriage amounts to is a profound healing of our long neglected and suffering soul, as well as the body, a healing of all our relationships with each other, whether personal, national, or racial, as these are placed in the context of what is of supreme value and importance, namely the transformation of our consciousness. So now I come to the actual work of alchemy and the description by the alchemists. And the lesser work, which is the beginning of the work, is the creation of the white stone or rose. Alchemy defines 3 and sometimes 4 stages in the great work of transformation and bringing forth the alchemical stone or gold. This process is circulatory and continuous, and moves through the different phases over and over again. The whole process is about the expansion of consciousness, about deepening our connection with the subtle field of the soul, about creating a relationship with the spirit of the depths. The stages of the lesser work are governed by fire and water, the transformative fire and the cleansing, clarifying waters of the soul. This process has to be repeated because it takes a lifetime, really, to deepen one's understanding and one's relationship with the spirit. It can't be done overnight. So the first stage of alchemy is about separating the soul from the body, and it's called the Negredo or separatio. It's the phase of death and dissolution. And its characteristic is a recurring depression, which the alchemists called a blackness, blacker than black. It's also about the encounter with the dragon and the shadow or power principle, which has the world in its grip. The symbol of the Negredo is the raven. The alchemists saw the Negredo or separatio as the state of blind suffering and ignorance before the dawning of awareness. They also call this state the unio naturalis, meaning the state we live in from day to day, responding to events as they happen, where we believe we have control of our lives, but are the victim of events, personal traumas, and the complexes, beliefs, and survival instincts which control us. In this state, the creative spirit in us is not free, but is a prisoner of all of these, and also of what we call our rational mind and our ego, which have no awareness of a deeper level of consciousness, so that our lives are lived, so to speak, from the perspective of the ego and the survival instincts. So to awaken from this state of bondage may involve intense anxiety, depression, and suffering, and is often triggered by a grievous loss of some kind. Depression can be a call to awaken to the deeper levels of the soul. The Negredo is the phase of the ego's dying and death as it gives up its illusion of freedom, supremacy, certainty, power, and control, and becomes aware of a deeper dimension of the soul. This may come as a great shock to it. It is a descent into the darkness of the unknown, which can be very frightening, and it involves the encounter with the dragon or the unconscious power drive of the instincts, that requires the withdrawal of negative projections onto others, the kind of cruel projections and attacks on others that flood social media and reveal the unconscious state of the collective psyche. This is an enormous challenge to the mass mind of today, with its total focus on what Jung called the spirit of the times, reflected in the superficial values and concerns which hypnotize millions of people and affect those millions whose lives are destroyed by the absence of meaning in modern culture. Separatio, therefore, involves conflict, suffering, fear, bewilderment, and surrender. The original sense of the oneness of our being is split into two. Yet paradoxically, this work of differentiation is the first stage of healing the soul by reuniting the conscious solar aspect of the psyche with the repudiated or ignored lunar aspect, reuniting the conscious mind with the heart and the lunar soul. So now we go through the stages of this transformation process. The fire of transformation burns and transforms the dross in our nature until the state of unconscious fusion with our instincts is transmuted into a higher and more conscious relationship with them. So we're not taken over by them. That's the crucial point here. The strange male-female form shown here is called the rebus, an intermediate state before the formation of the hermaphrodite. It is an image of what the alchemists call the first conjunctio, when the previous unconscious state is differentiated into two separate yet conjoined units. Here, the rebus is undergoing the burning away of the dross that has covered the gold of the spirit. It is whitened in the fire and turned to ashes. Fire in this phase is the main agent of transformation. So there will be very strong feelings involved, and that is what fire symbolizes. Collectively, humanity in the last century and this one has been through a terrible calcinatio. We have witnessed the images of incineration in the gas ovens of Auschwitz, the obliteration of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, death by napalm, depleted uranium, and white phosphorus bombs, the ruthless bombing and destruction of ancient cities like Aleppo, the horrific collapse of the Twin Towers, the catastrophic invasion of Iraq, and the subsequent wars in the Middle East. Millions of helpless civilians have perished in these events or wander the earth as refugees seeking shelter. Only Gorecki's Third Symphony does justice to the suffering endured by them. No new life can arise without the death of the old. So here we have an image of the shamanic descent into the grave of the underworld of the soul and the emergence of the transformed initiate. We see the sowing of seeds that will be transformed into the green shoots of regeneration, and we can see it rising out of the grave there. This image goes back to Egypt and the annual return of the dismembered god Osiris in the wheat that grew from the black mud deposited on the banks of the Nile. Here is an image of a man holding a sword and a golden severed head, standing in front of a dismembered body. We can know that after the experience of dying or dismemberment, there will be regeneration. Dismemberment is about letting go of old beliefs, dissolving old angers, hatreds, bitternesses, resentments, and guilt, in which the spirit has become imprisoned, entangled, or buried. It's about undoing the structures that we find ourselves in while adapting or trying to adapt to the false beliefs and values of our culture. Psychic growth can be a very painful and frightening process for the ego or conscious mind, and this image of dismemberment reflects it. But here again, you see the beautiful border around the edge, which symbolizes bringing oneself into relationship with nature and the flowering of nature within us. The melancholia and suffering of the alchemist are also the anguish of spirit itself, who is undergoing the travail and pain of dismemberment and transformation. The spirit suffers with us in the agonizing experiences of our own lives because we are part of spirit and it is part of us. Both are participating in a cosmic passion play. Now, the second stage of alchemy is called the Albedo or Salutio, and it's about the encounter with the feminine soul, the neglected aspect of ourselves. This divine water, they said, makes the dead living and the living dead. It lightens the darkness and darkens the light. This is the stage of awakening and healing, the opening of the heart, the copious shedding of tears, of regret and sorrow, and of memories that come back, memories of painful experiences. It's about the dawning of insight, illumination, and wisdom. It's about, yes, so 1 second. The albedo is the phase of baptism or immersion in the watery feminine womb of the soul. It is a process of washing, cleansing, purifying, clarifying, or seeing more clearly. The light of insight and wisdom begins to dawn, as well as a new humility and a disengagement from achieving superficial goals. The alchemists compared this stage to the gradual whitening of the sky after the darkness of the night, and also to the moon or moonlight. It's about the awakening of the feminine lunar principle, symbolized by moonlight, the awakening of the heart, the dawning of compassion for oneself and for the interminable suffering of people on this planet, not only people, but animals and the dwindling biosphere. It is about dissolving rigid, fixed beliefs, such as the belief that our lives are without purpose or meaning, that consciousness originates in the physical brain, or that there is only material reality. It is about melting the snow and ice of frozen feelings, shedding tears of sorrow and regret. As this transformation proceeds, the creativity of the spirit is released like a fountain from the depths of the soul and seeks expression in some form. It's released from fixation in old suffering, old memories, and as these are released, so the energy is available for expression in new form. In this phase comes the discovery of unknown gifts. Energy that was held in old traumas and negative patterns is released. There may be powerful transformative or awakening dreams like the one I had of a cosmic woman described in the Dream of the Cosmos. It is about integrating the shadow, both the unknown creative aspects and also the destructive aspects that are the result of deep wounds to the heart, inflicted by parents or siblings or teachers or partners, or simply by the bitter struggle to survive in an unconscious world. In this image, the alchemist sits in a tub while an assistant uses the bellows to increase the fire and the heat. The dove of the feminine Holy Spirit rests on his head in blessing. Water washes, cleanses, renews. Fire burns, purifies, transmutes. By these processes, the primal matter of our psychic life is refined. By these processes, the primal matter of our psychic life is refined, cleansed, rendered more subtle and translucent to the ground of spirit. By these methods, the quintessential gold of the spirit emerges from beneath the rust or verdigris that has accrued to it over the millennia of human evolution. The passionate intensity of devotion to the work is the fire that transforms, the fire that is spirit itself. The work may be any work that serves life and humanity and that involves love and devotion. In another image from this exquisite book, Splendor Solis, a dark man carrying in his limbs the three colors of the alchemical process, the black, white, and red, emerges from the black mud of the Negredo. He is greeted by an angelic woman whose white wings are covered with peacock eyes and whose robe is covered with flowers. She wears a crown and a necklace studded with rubies, and a six-pointed star rests on her head. She is divine wisdom, or Sophia, also known as the Holy Spirit, the divine feminine aspect of deity that was rejected by the patriarchal religions, whom the alchemists took as their guide. She holds the red robe, which symbolizes the Rubido, or final stage of alchemy, and a new, regenerated, and integrated consciousness. Her yellow sleeve hints at the gold of the final stage. All around her are the flowers and animals that are part of the sacred unity of life. Notice the red rose in the top left-hand corner. This is an image that also goes back to the Egyptian mysteries of Osiris, reborn from the mud of the Nile. The feminine image of Sophia as divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit is the presiding image of alchemy. Her origin may be in the great goddesses of the lunar era, the goddess Asherah in the first temple in Jerusalem, who was worshipped as divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, or the wisdom texts of the Bible, of the Old Testament, where wisdom speaks as the Holy Spirit and offers the bread of understanding and the water of wisdom to man. The feminine archetype at its highest level has always been associated with nature and with soul, not soul in a personal sense, but soul as the great cosmic sea of being in which we are all immersed. The alchemists kept alive this ancient concept of soul and took divine wisdom as their guide. They knew the Holy Spirit to be a living force, an active presence, pouring out the waters of love and illumination onto humanity. For many centuries in a European culture deeply repressive of the soul and the feminine, alchemy and Kabbalah secretly carried the image of this disowned aspect of the Godhead. Alchemists who were Kabbalists knew her as the Shekinah. In one alchemical text, wisdom speaks these unforgettable words to the alchemists. Understand, ye sons of wisdom, protect me, and I will protect you. Give me my due, that I may help you. One of the most powerful and profound statements of alchemy. This is a message for our time, as the longing to heal nature and serve the life of the planet is rising in us. When the alchemists painted these extraordinarily beautiful images, they were working hand in hand with spirit to manifest spirit in this dimension of experience with their outstanding artistic skills. The very act of devotion to this work, communicating with the subtle field of the soul, day after day, month after month, developed their insight and their gifts. This is how the white stone or rose and the lunar queen were constellated within them. The end of the first phase and the formation of the white stone or rose is illustrated by the retort holding the white lunar queen, illumined by the sun. In this image, if you look up at the top, Mercury sits in a chariot drawn by two cocks, who herald the coming of the dawn. The matter that is being transmuted has now reached a stage of fixation in the alchemists that no fire or passion can destroy. Below, there is a scene showing the flourishing of the arts and the sciences. Matter has been raised through the stages of the Negredo and the Albedo to a state where it can become the vehicle for the manifestation of spirit. Part of the work of the Albedo is to redeem the body, healing the split between mind and body, becoming aware of the atrocious suffering inflicted on the body throughout the solar era. The origin of negative projections onto the body is the belief that since the body has to die, it must be contaminated by sin and is therefore expendable, doesn't matter what happens to it. A colossal work of healing is required in order for the body and matter to be recognized as the living expression and vehicle of spirit. Too often today, in a secular culture that has no spiritual awareness whatever, the body is viewed as a mechanism that can be made to conform to the will of the mind. Reaching ever deeper into the heart of their psychic life that was reflected in the mirror of their retort, the alchemists began to see the unity of everything, how the animating ground of everything is spirit. They saw that matter was not dead, inert, unconscious. They felt the aliveness of matter, entered into dialogue with it, and wept with wonder and amazement at what was revealed to them. Now I come to the greater work that they call the Rubido, which is the final stage of the great work. The Rubido is about the creation of an immortal body of light, the integration of body, soul, and spirit, and the experience of union with the divine ground that they call the unus mundus. Its symbols are the red stone or red rose, the divine elixir, the flower of immortality, and the quintessential gold, and the phoenix. The young king symbolizes the illumined consciousness, which is the red tincture, stone, or universal medicine that can heal all afflictions. The will to power of the ego that can impede or destroy the work has been overcome. Here, Luna, riding in a chariot above, has brought forth the fixed red tincture, the universal healing medicine, symbolized by the figure of the young king who stands on an inverted moon and is illumined by the rays of the sun. The white lunar soul is now tinctured with the gold of the rising sun. This final phase is about becoming aware of, inhabiting, an immortal body of light, the starry or celestial body that we may inhabit after our death. It dissolves the duality that split nature from spirit and led to the perilous situation we are in now. It is about the union of body, soul, and spirit in the rising and full radiance of the sun as a symbol of the light and love of the divine ground. The Rubido signifies the bursting open of the heart, the release of compassion as a fountain of light and love, flowing towards all forms of life, towards the earth, towards each other. The longing to heal, nurture, protect, and cherish is embodied in some kind of creative action. The alchemists likened the final stage of the Rubido to the resurrection and to the reddening of the sky as the sun rises to the zenith, irradiating and warming the earth. Red gold is the color of the Rubido, and the red rose and red stone are symbols of the completion of the great work. In this beautiful image of the hermaphrodite, the soul of the alchemist has integrated not only the solar and lunar, conscious and unconscious aspects of his being, but also the invisible and visible dimensions of reality. He and she hold an egg that contains the colors of the phases of the process, the black of the Negredo, the white of the Albedo, and the red of the Rubido. These are also reflected in the red and white wings and the black body of the figures. The man wears a solar halo and the woman a lunar one. The mirror in the center reflects the surrounding landscape, which is also the inner landscape of the soul. The landscape within and without the mirror is tinctured with gold. I am reminded of the saying of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and the above as the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male and the female not be female, then you shall enter the kingdom." As they watch the matter of their psychic life transform in the mirror of their alchemical retorts, the alchemists experienced the immense mystery of what they were witnessing. They realized that they were assisting spirit in the evolutionary effort of bringing itself to consciousness over eons of earth time, leading its creation back to the source. They had revealed to them in a gradual process of illumination the innate divinity of nature and all life processes. They saw that one divine spirit was at work in all forms of life and in human consciousness as well. They sought to bring to birth in themselves the hidden spirit that longed to be rescued from its buried state. In accomplishing this double act of redemption, they became the sons of divine wisdom, inheritors of the true philosophical gold. And they became the ministers, not the masters, of the stone, their lives illumined and guided by the Holy Spirit, eternally pouring forth light and love from the divine ground. No one, they said, may accomplish this work except through humility and love. We cannot take a course in alchemy to become an alchemist. Alchemy invites a shamanic experience that happens to us when we are ready to awaken. I would like to share with you a modern example of the experience of the Rubido. It is taken from a recently published book called Silicon, written by an Italian physicist called Federico Fagin, an extraordinary, brilliant, and wonderful man who moved from Italy to America in his 20s, and working closely with matter, like an alchemist, invented the first microprocessor and went on to make other dazzling products, such as the touchpads and touch screens all of us now use. At a stage of the greatest success of his life, he found that he was unhappy and couldn't understand why. And then something happened, and this is what he wrote about it. In December of 1990, while I was with my family at Lake Tahoe, I awoke around midnight to get a drink of water. I looked out over the lake while sipping the refreshing water. When I went back to bed again and tried to fall asleep, I felt a powerful rush of energy emerge from my chest like nothing I had ever felt before and could not even imagine possible. The feeling was love, but a love so intense and so incredibly fulfilling that it surpassed any other notions I had about love. Even more unbelievable was the fact that I knew I was the source of this love. I experienced it as a broad beam of shimmering white light, alive and beatific, gushing from my heart with incredible strength. Then suddenly that light exploded. It filled the room and expanded to embrace the entire universe with the same white brilliance. I knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was the substance from which all that exists is made. This is what created the universe out of itself. Then, with immense surprise, I knew that I was that light. The entire experience lasted perhaps 1 minute, and it changed me forever. My relationship with the world had always been as a separate observer, perceiving the universe as outside myself and disconnected from me. What made this even more astonishing was its impossible perspective, because I was both the experiencer and the experience. I was simultaneously the observer of the world and the world. I was the world observing itself. I was concurrently knowing that the world is made of a substance that feels like love, and that I am that substance. This experience contained an unprecedented force of truth, because it felt true at all the levels of my being. At the physical level, my body was alive and vibrant like I had never felt before. At the emotional level, I experienced myself as an impossibly powerful source of love. And at the mental level, I knew with certainty that all is made of love. I now see my identity as that unique point of view with which one, all that is, the totality of what exists, observes and knows itself. I am a point of view of one, a portion of one, indivisible from it. That vivid experience revealed a reality more real than the physical world I had previously thought was the only reality. My experience has maintained its original intensity and clarity over the years and has changed my life from the inside out. I asked Federico Fagin permission to quote that marvelous passage from his book. If we could take this revelation to our heart, which is the conduit to our soul, it could help us to heal all our relationships and transform our actions in the world. Because at the quantum level, we are all connected. When thousands of us begin to heal our soul, millions are affected. I believe we can heal the terrible errors our beliefs have created. We can choose whether to continue in these beliefs or to live and act from a different relationship with life. As we do so, our minds would serve the deepest longing of our hearts, the deepest wisdom of our soul. And we would know with Giordano Bruno that a single force, love, links and gives life to infinite worlds. Thank you very much.